Today on Locked On Canadians, it's some more prospect talk. We're going to talk about the players who've been invited to World Junior Camp this far, and that's all coming up on today's Locked On Canadians.
Locked On Canadians, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 742. And thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. 5 days a week talking about your Montreal Canadiens. My name is Laura Saba, also known as the Active Stick, and I'm joined, as always, by the wonderful Scott Matla, who carried the show after two eventful games out on the West Coast. Did the recaps, wild, wild games. And so today we figured we would turn it around a little bit back to the future, since we just came off that Wright versus Slavkovsky showdown, matchup, whatever we want to call it. About the Montreal Canadiens prospects who may or will be going to the World Juniors at the end of this month. Scott, who shall we start with? There are so many young adult children, whatever we want to call them, that are at least invited to World Junior camps. I mean, I've got my favorite. I don't know about you. Why don't you take it away?
So my thought with this is that because there's some room for discussion, especially when it comes to like Team Canada and Team USA with what they're going to do. So far, the list of invitees and no one is a guaranteed lock, but the invitees we have are Adam Engstrom is going for Team Sweden. Oliver Kapanen is going for Team Finland. Owen Beck, Joshua Waugh, and Riley Kidney have been invited for Team Canada. Lane Hudson has been invited for Team USA, as expected. And when Team Slovakia releases their roster announcement, it is assumed, I would be stunned if it's not, that Philip Machar will be on that list as well. And Uri Slavkovsky is kind of in the we don't know yet thing. So I figured maybe towards the end we discuss that and Team Canada later on too, just because there are some more invitees that got announced today that may impact Beck and everybody. So I thought maybe we'd start with the duo playing over in Europe right now. Adam Engstrom playing for Rogala in the under-20 and in the Champions Hockey League with a couple of SHL games as well. Patrick Bexell obviously has been covering all of that. And before the tournament itself kicks off, we will definitely have him on to give us a look at what's going on with Adam Engstrom, what's going on with Petteri Nurmi, who's playing in Liga in Finland, and Kapanen, who's playing for Kalpa, who is once again back for Finland. I believe this is the third World Juniors that he's going to, which is a pretty impressive feat for a younger player, but I know he's nursing an injury. And I think the biggest thing is that Adam Engstrom has kind of not fallen off the radar, but it's kind of under the radar for a lot of Canadiens fans for potentially one of two reasons. He's picked in the same draft that Lane Hudson was picked in, which if you were a defender picked in this draft after Lane Hudson, sorry. Sorry about that. There's not much you can do about the short king dominating the NCAA right now. At that same pick, a lot of us, wanted Jordan Dumais picked from the Halifax Mooseheads, who's one of the top scoring forwards in the QMJHL, also invited to Team Canada's World Junior Selection Camp there. And he's flying under the radar, and I don't think he should be. He's got a really nice skating approach. He's been putting up really solid point totals, and I'm looking them up right now just so I have them in front of me here. Elite Prospects, by the way, is an absolute lifesaver when you're doing a show and you forgot to do show prep beforehand because you fell asleep on the couch after making dinner. In the under-20 league for Rogala, he has 13 points in 7 games, 4 goals, 9 assists, and in 21 SHL games this year, he has 4 points, which, you know what? He's a defenseman playing in a very high skill league, and he's obviously under the age of 20 years old, and he's getting regular enough minutes for the team there that he can consistently play. He's someone that I think a lot of people need to keep an eye on in terms of prospects there. And I do think he's in tough because Sweden's always a very loaded team. But I got to say, I don't see any reason why he couldn't possibly make this team.
I'm going to agree with you there. So, for those of you who aren't as familiar with him, I would really, really encourage you to check out Patrick Bexell's work on Habs Eyes on the Prize, because he's been covering obviously Engstrom since the beginning, and that's basically how I get my knowledge of him. I think it's exactly like you said. It's context, right? I mean, like, we're getting some of our listeners even asking. It's not about defending, but like asking about Jared Davidson, right? And on this show, we focus so much on the progress and success of Owen Beck that, like, when you're all the way back there behind some of these highly touted prospects, sometimes it's easy to kind of just forget. And for me, I think what I want to see is, like, I really obviously hope that he makes the team. And the thing that I find that's interesting is that Sweden is always this perennial threat, but often it goes one way or another, and sometimes it'll go off the rails extremely quickly. And I wonder if it's it's one of those things where the same teams are going to be the ones to watch. You're always watching your Finlands, your Canadas, your US, your all of that. And the thing that I love about this tournament is that it could go any way. It could go any way. There's like one wrong bounce can have Team USA out like from the beginning, or Team Canada could lose in like a major upset or something like that. So for me, what I want to see is honestly like how he plays on Team Sweden versus opponents that are his peers. That's what I want to see, because like I don't know enough about him. I haven't watched him enough in action, like most of you. And some of us have to admit this, even though it might be hard. Some of us do have to admit this, is that a lot of our prospect watching is not entire games, it's highlights. So a lot of the opinions that we form about certain prospects, particularly some that we're arguing should be on teams when really they didn't do all that much to play themselves onto them, is because we're looking at the highlights and we're not looking at the games as a whole or the minutes they play as a whole. So for me, and we're almost running out of time to talk about Oliver Kapanen, but I think that what I want to see is how he plays against this, like the dynamic competition that he's going to be facing.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it is Kapanen's uncertain just because he is currently injured. I assume if he's cleared to play or it's not as serious as it potentially is, he's going to be on that team. He's having a pretty strong year for Kalpa. It's a really nice step forward for him there. And I hope Engstrom makes it, just because I think he's someone who could very easily surprise in that tournament as well. But when it comes to World Juniors, teams make dumb decisions sometimes, and somehow Team USA, as it stands right now, hasn't done that, which is actually quite nice.
And we're going to talk about that in just one moment. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for betting, sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. And here's the thing: if you want to bet on bad decisions that Team USA is making in the World Juniors, you can check out betonline.net, where you can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and even esports. We've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, which I know you do because you're listening to this one, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. So you can just head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, Scott, let us talk about said potential bad decisions that Team USA is making. I think they made a very good decision personally in this one, where they invited Lane Hutson.
Yes, I'm actually bringing up their roster right now because for whatever reason, the link that I clicked on went to an article saying that they released the roster instead of just telling me what the roster is. Lane Hutson's part of a really exciting defensive group here. Shai Boom, Seamus Casey, who is someone who I really liked going into the draft here, plays a very similar style to Lane Hutson. Luke Hughes which if I don't mention him, Devils fans are going to yell at us, and I don't want Devils fans to do that. But also in terms of like the forward group, guys like Cutter Gauthier, Logan Cooley, Chaz Lucius, Cam Lund, Rutger McGroarty, Will Smith, who is one of the top prospects in this draft. I was really concerned that Lane Hutson's size was going to keep him off of this roster. He's listed at 5'9", which makes him the shortest player on Team USA, or tied with Gavin Brindley, who's playing for the University of Michigan. And I'm glad that it didn't, because in all the years past, Team USA's biggest thing has been, well, we have big guy.
Size and grit.
Yes, which explains why, Tyler Boucher is on the roster. But Lane Hutson's season has been so good and impossible to ignore that even Team USA, which continues at any point in time to step on rakes in front of them when it comes to roster selection, didn't in this circumstance. And I think that's really, really important, is that I don't know what role he's going to play. And to be quite honest with you, there are 7 left shot defensemen out of 10 on this team. There's a lot of, competition for spots here. And the hardest part about World Juniors is if you have a bad pre-tournament game, or, you have a bad opening game, even if you make the roster, that can basically end your opportunities to be a threat there. But I don't think we're going to have to worry about that with Lane Hutson. He plays in a tough conference in, the NCAA. Hockey East is always competitive. A lot of these other guys are coming from the Big Ten or the NCHC out in the central part of the U.S. here. I don't think he's going to be the top option on this team, but I do think this is going to be a Lane Hutson introductory tournament for a lot of other people around the hockey world. So a lot of people have known and have been read from the gospel of Hutson at this point, us included. I'm really, really excited because this tournament is made for him. Go out, score goals, run the power play, be exciting. I cannot wait to see what Lane Hutson does when the entire hockey world spotlight is back on him again.
I love his confidence. We've talked about it before. He's a ballsy kid. I also like that he's now listed as 5'9", so he has like 1 more inch to go.
I mean, he was right. He brought that, that note from his endocrinologist that he was going to get taller. He still looks like a child, mind you. Yeah. Like, he still looks like a child. But the thing is, when you're putting up a points per game pace that is comparable to Cale Makar,
you can't ignore that. If you're Team USA, even if your instinct is to go for the big tough guy, which they did in some cases, like, you can't ignore what Lane Hutson has put together. And this is the thing too, is that like, he's been so smart about it, because a lot of times players that are this hot in the first half of the season, they tend to cool off and regress to the mean, over the course of the second half. Like, he's done everything to show that he might not be able to keep up this pace for the entire season, but a comparable pace is important, and so I'm excited to see what he does. And I'm, as a Team Canada fan, I'm a bit nervous to see what he does as well against Canada. It's going to be really fun and interesting.
And that's the thing, is it's like 17 points in 14 games would be good, even if he was just a forward. Like, over a point per game pace is always good in the NCAA, which is not a notoriously high scoring league. Doing it as a freshman defenseman who is playing power play 2, who is not playing top pairing minutes for the Boston University Terriers, is really, really impressive. And that's, like we said, you can't ignore that. And I'm really glad that it seems like he's second on the team in scoring behind a guy who is, I believe, 4 years older than he is. Like,
yep.
I can only say so many things. And obviously, as we get closer and closer to World Juniors, we will have people on to help us preview the final rosters and teams and everything. But I think Lane Hutson, as good as Team Canada is, and we will get to Slovakia and stuff in our last segment a little bit, but as good as they are, I think a lot of Habs fans' eyes are going to be on Lane Hutson at this tournament, because not a lot of people get a chance to watch the NCAA or know how to watch the NCAA. And I think this is going to be their opportunity for that.
I think it's going to be really exciting. Also, it's clear that Maple agrees back there in the background about our short king. Scott, I think it's time to turn it over to Team Canada. I feel like that's going to be the dominate the next segment, even though we are going to touch on Philip Machar and Yuri Slavkovsky / question mark. And that's all coming up in just one moment. Before we get into this segment, I do want to remind everybody that tomorrow is our Friday mailbag episode. So I would like you to please send us mailbag questions, mailbag questions in the form of, you can send them as direct messages on Twitter at LO_Canadians. You can also just literally reply to us on Twitter at LO_Canadians. You can also email them to us at lockedoncanadians@gmail.com, and also leave them in the comments of the YouTube videos. As always, do not be mean to anybody else that is commenting, because we will delete your comment and forget you exist. So please, please, please send us your mailbag questions. Obviously, there's no game, so we are going to touch on a couple of things tomorrow in our first segment, but we do have some planned content, but we do want to make sure that you get all your mailbag questions in, because this is a great opportunity to have a nice long mailbag episode. All right, Scott, time for Team Canada. You're on mute.
Can we hear me now?
We can hear you now. I promise I did not mute Scott on purpose because I'm a Team Canada fan.
No, my very wonderful puppy who is here next to me unplugged my microphone. So it actually switched now off of my normal one to my MacBook microphone. So if I sound different, sorry. For Team Canada, there are 3 Canadians prospects who are going. Obviously, Owen Beck is going, Riley Kidney is going, and Joshua Waugh is going to their selection camp. Kidney is actually the only returning member of this. He made it as their 13th forward extra guy in 2022 before the tournament was canceled, I believe. Obviously, Joshua Waugh was the last cut and then proceeded to absolutely destroy the QMJHL afterwards. And Owen Beck obviously was far too young to have made the team last year in his first season in the OHL. So it is really good to see that all 3 of them got an invite. The hardest part now for Owen Beck, who is debatably their top defensive forward, at least at the time of when they picked this roster, Shane Wright today and Brant Clark were also announced as they are being released by their NHL team, Seattle and LA, to head to Canada's World Junior Selection Camp in Moncton. And for Owen Beck, that's a little bit bad news, because Owen Beck would have been playing in the role that Shane Wright would have. And that's because Connor Bedard is likely going to be Canada's top forward. If he's not, I don't know what you're doing, but Owen Beck now he's facing a little bit of an uphill battle there. You have Connor Bedard. You have, obviously, Shane Wright's going to be there. You have competition there, but at the same time, Owen Beck's the absolute, one of the most key guys I would want in a tournament like this after watching him play. And if he doesn't go, he doesn't go. It's not the end of the world. I still think he very much deserves to do so. And like you talked about with Lauren Kelly, it's like his growth every single year it's impressive to watch. And he's just absolutely one of the best steals that we've. I don't even know if you can call him a steal, but at this point, he's going to be a piece that if Team Canada doesn't take him, they could regret it. And if they do take him, there's no part of his game that's going to cause them to have to second guess anything like this.
Let me ask you a question, Scott. What in everything you know about Owen Beck makes us think in any way that he's not going to do every single thing it takes to get there and to make and cement a name for himself in this tournament?
And that's exactly it. He kills penalties. He can win key faceoffs. He's really defensively responsible. There's no role on Team Canada that Owen Beck cannot play, because it's a best on best short sample size tournament. Bring your best forwards for this. And we've talked before about why would you want to, bring a defensive forward only? Why would you only want to bring a guy who does one thing? Beck does that and then does other things too. There's no reason to not take Owen Beck with you. And even if he is like your fourth line center, okay, cool. You should have a fourth line that can go out there and score goals too. And Scott Wheeler had it projected originally that it was Joshua Waugh, Owen Beck, Riley Kidney on Team Canada's third line. And you know what? Hell yeah. I am all for that all the time. I think this is going to be the only, like, if Lane Hutson gets cut, I think people are going to chalk it up to, well, Team USA doing Team USA things. Remember, Cole Caulfield in the bumper position instead of a shooting position at World Juniors kind of thing. Not taking Owen Beck, I think, would aggravate Canadians fans far more than anything else they could possibly do. I think just because of how consistently well he's played this year, there's no reason to not take him.
That's the thing. He deserves to go. So if he doesn't go, it'll be up to a roster construction philosophy that I hope Team Canada can justify. I think that's the way that I feel about him. So let's talk a little bit about Joshua Roy, because obviously he had that phenomenal season in the Q last year. We're not hearing all that much about him this season. We know that he's still very promising. We know that he's still a very skilled player. So what do we hope to see from him, assuming that he does make the roster? I don't necessarily think that he won't. What do we want to see from him to kind of bring him back into that conversation that we were having about him last year?
I think Joshua Waugh this year is that we've talked about this a lot, is that he fits into that category of probably too good for junior hockey, but because of archaic rules, he can't play in the AHL, which I think would probably be the right step up for him this season. Still very good at scoring, still very good at, setting plays up and being smart there. But it's very clear that he's a step above this league. So it isn't as impressive playing where he is right now, but he's working a lot more on the little nuances to his games in terms of defensive responsibility and skating and reading plays and everything. He, again, a lot like, everyone else on Team Canada, it's a loaded roster. A guy like Joshua Waugh might play bottom 6 minutes. It's not going to be like in a checking role, but like he's not going to be the guy like a Bedard or someone else is going to be on that team here. He's going to be, relied upon to do whatever it is to make the team at this point, as everyone pulls their weight in a certain direction. He's not going to be the target guy for everything like he is in Sherbrooke or he would be in the QMJHL. He's going to be a piece of the pie to make everything work here a little bit. So if he does make the team, and I think he will as a veteran going into this, don't expect Joshua Waugh to be like the leading scorer on this team. Now with Connor Bedard anyways, expect him to be a supporting piece. Simple as that.
And you know what? If he's a good enough supporting piece, then he's going to continue to be in the future of this team. Because I know, like, we're watching the World Juniors, and now with the Canadians in a rebuild, I feel like the prospects and how they do, everything is heightened. That expectation is heightened, and that excitement is heightened. So let's talk about heightening expectations and excitement. And let's turn our attention to Filip Mesar. So we've been hearing, obviously, that the situation where he's at in Kitchener isn't all that great. So it's possible that he's not going to be playing there any longer and maybe finding a situation that fits him a little bit better. And with Slavkovsky, I mean, if you're his team, obviously, if you're Team Slovakia, like you invite him. No brainer. But the problem is the Canadians are the ones that hold all the cards in this scenario. I don't know what they're going to do.
So the thing about Filip Mesar is the Kitchener Rangers are not very good in the OHL, which is not, a mean thing to say, but it is unfortunately, correct.
Not a great place for him.
Yeah, he's not struggling, like he's playing well, all things considered. It's just that I think a lot of people think it's a step back from where he was playing at professionally. In 15 games for the Kitchener Rangers, he has 18 points, 8 goals, 10 assists. He's playing well. He can shoot. He can skate really well. He's a really good playmaker. He's going to make Team Slovakia for World Juniors. That's not up for debate. Juraj Slavkovsky is the interesting part because he is a game changer for Team Slovakia. He was in the previous, World Championships at the Olympics and everything else. And going into this tournament, the Canadians, like you said, hold all the cards. And currently, he's not playing 8 minutes a night on the fourth line anymore. He's playing middle 6 minutes for the Montreal Canadiens. That's arguably better for his development than going to World Juniors and then coming back. But someone said this on Twitter talking to Mark Dumont is the Montreal Canadiens will always be there for Juraj Slafkovsky, and he will have more games for the Montreal Canadiens. There are only so many World Juniors games that Juraj Slafkovsky can play. And if they get guys back, if Brendan Gallagher is back, if Mike Hoffman is back, they may say they may give him that option. And if Shane Wright is going, there's no reason why Juraj Slafkovsky can't go as well. The Canadiens have call-ups in the AHL they can use. They should use them if that's the case, if he wants to go. Like if this is a thing that he really truly wants to do, you let him go play because it's important to him. And who knows, maybe he goes and he dominates and he comes back and it's just like something clicked in his brain, little things. Because he's been playing against NHL, adults. Again, he was in Finland last year when he was drafted too. He would probably be a terror to play against if you're some of these other kids. Is Slovakia a great team? No. But is Slafkovsky talented enough on his own to potentially drag them and give those top teams a scare? Absolutely. I would be really curious to see what the case is. And I know with the way the injuries are lining up for the Canadiens right now, it's not really in the cards just because Monahan's out, Hoffman's out, Gallagher's out. Who knows who else is nursing whatever. I think they want to give him that opportunity in Montreal, but I'm not opposed to seeing him play there, but I understand the reasoning why he is not at this point.
I just muted myself to make a point. That's how we're doing over here at Locked On Canadiens. I agree with what Scott said. I don't think it's necessarily the wrong decision either way, but I do think, like Scott said, like you kind of have to give him a little bit of control and a little bit of a choice in the situation. In the meantime, the little bit of control and a little bit of choice in this situation is you guys get to drive the content tomorrow because there is no game to recap. We do have a couple of things we want to get out of the way off the top of tomorrow's show, but the rest of it is going to be all mailbag questions. So we demand, we politely request with love and gratitude some mailbag questions for tomorrow's episode. We've got a couple already in the pipeline, so you can email us at lockedoncanadians@gmail.com. You can DM or add us on Twitter at LO_Canadians, or you can leave the questions in the YouTube comments for any of the videos we've had this week. I'll go as far back as Mondays to look for mailbag questions, and then that's it. So thank you so much for listening. If you want to find Scott on Twitter, he's at Scott Metla. If you want to find me on Twitter, I am at The Active Stick, and we will talk to you tomorrow.